Levo stood in the White's chamber, his breath slowly settling after the whirlwind of battle. The air was thick with the scent of scorched bone and ancient dust. All around them, silence reclaimed its throne. The creature lay vanquished, its twisted form scattered across the cold stone floor. But something still pulsed in the room. The shattered sigil carved into the floor gave off a lingering purple glow, its faint light throbbing like a wounded heartbeat. Levo's gaze drifted toward the southwest corner of the chamber, where the torchlight flickered oddly, shadows clinging to the stone in a way they shouldn't. He frowned, intuition prickling at the back of his neck, and stepped lightly toward the corner. "Something's off," he murmured. Kneeling, he ran his paw along the seams of the wall. His fingers caught on a hair-thin line, a gap too straight, too deliberate. His eyes narrowed. "Yes," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. The edge of a hidden door revealed itself beneath layers of dust and neglect, but no visible mechanism offered a way to open it. He turned to call for help, but paused. Tarak was already there, silent as moonlight on snow, eyes fixed on the floor beside him. "There," Tarak said, his voice low and sure, pointing to a single stone just slightly raised from the rest. "Tread on that." Levo stepped onto the stone with care. There was a muted click, and a breath of old air sighed from the wall as the hidden door creaked open just an inch. Relief washed over them. Levo reached forward, fingers curling around the ancient edge, and slowly pulled the door open. The sound echoed softly through the chamber, a whisper of rusted hinges and forgotten passageways. Behind him, Zenith approached, his heavy boots scuffing gently against the flagstones. He slipped the white staff into the folds of his cloak, its dark power now hidden, and peered over Levo's shoulder. "What have we here?" he asked, curiosity lighting his face as the shadowed corridor beyond revealed itself. The secret passage yawned open, cold, dark, and waiting. Levo lingered at the threshold of the newly revealed passage, eyes narrowed as darkness spilled out before him. Yet, despite the thrill of discovery and the tingle of magic still crackling faintly in his fur, something tugged at his thoughts, a subtle itch in the back of his mind, like a note left unsung. He frowned, glancing back over his shoulder. "Wait," he said slowly, his voice low and thoughtful. "Before we press on, shouldn't we finish searching where we've already been?" Tarak tilted his head, but said nothing, watching him closely. Levo continued. "The echo chamber. The room with the collapsed roof. I'm sure there was a door there. Maybe something buried, but definitely something. It didn't sit right with me." Zenith raised a brow, adjusting his cloak. "You think we missed something?" Levo nodded. "I don't want to leave blind spots behind us, not in a place like this." Tarak gave a small grunt of agreement. Sufficient. Without another word, they turned from the secret corridor, its mouth still open behind them like a patient beast, and retraced their steps, back through the quiet gloom, back to the chamber where the roof had caved in and shafts of pale light danced with the dust. Tarak moved with the practiced silence of one accustomed to the weight of shadows. He led the way back into the ruined chamber, the pale shafts of light cutting through the dust like ethereal blades. The scent of age and decay still clung thick in the air, and the collapsed beams loomed overhead like skeletal remains of the past. He paused at the threshold, eyes scanning the wreckage. "No need for the candle," he murmured to the others, voice barely above a whisper. "We'll not wake anything with flame." With deliberate care, he stepped over the rubble, boots silent on broken stone. His eyes, sharp as ever, caught a dull gleam beneath a rotted beam near the northern wall. He crouched, brushing aside brittle wood and powdered slate. There, nestled between shattered remnants of one of the skeletons, was a heavy iron key, its surface worn but still solid, and marked with faint swirling patterns almost lost to corrosion. Beside it, almost absurdly delicate in comparison, lay a small music box no larger than his palm. It was intricately carved, the filigree of silver and brass forming delicate halls and tiny symbols that seemed almost arcane. Tarak picked it up, turning it gently in his fingers. He didn't open it, yet. There was a weight to such objects in places like this, a story, perhaps, still trapped within. "Found something," he called softly over his shoulder. Levo padded up, eyes lighting with curiosity. "You think the key fits the door we found?" "Possibly," Tarak said, "but I'm more curious about this." He held up the music box, and for a moment, even the dust seemed to hang still in the air. Zenith approached next, peering down at the objects. Strange finds for a tomb. Stranger still if they're meant to be found, Tarak replied. Zenith's gaze settled on the unopened door along the northern wall, its weathered surface half hidden by the gloom, as if it were waiting to be remembered. He turned to the others, his voice low but firm. "Shall we continue?" he asked, one hand resting on the hilt of his axe, the other brushing the folds of his cloak where the white staff was hidden. The question hung in the air, carried on dust motes and the lingering weight of unspoken unease. A door unopened always held promise and danger. Levo gave a cautious nod, still eyeing the music box in Tarak's hand with quiet intrigue. Tarak, as ever, said nothing at first, only stepped forward, key in one hand, the other trailing along the stone wall, eyes scanning for another hidden mechanism. Something waited beyond that door. Zenith opened the door. It creaked on ancient hinges, revealing a long corridor lined with the same black slate as before. At the far end, another door stood, silent and foreboding. The party advanced cautiously, boots echoing softly on the stone floor. Zenith pushed open the second door, and there they were. Two more skeletons stood in the room beyond, their rusted weapons already raised as if frozen mid-attack. Their eyeless skulls turned slowly, unnaturally toward the party. Levo didn't hesitate. He summoned his magic with a flick of his paw, arcane energy swirling in his fingertips. "Let's go!" he cried, and fired a magic missile straight at the nearer skeleton. The bolts struck true. The undead creature's shield, little more than dry, brittle wood wrapped in rusted iron, offered no resistance. The force blasted through its ribcage, scattering bones across the chamber. "Bah!" said Levo. Tarak blinked and turned at the strange sound, only to find a bright blue sheep standing next to him, blinking slowly, wool shimmering faintly with magical residue. The creature stared at Tarak with what could only be described as mild irritation. "Oh my god," Tarak muttered, "a blue sheep." Levo wobbled slightly, eyes wide. Wild magic danced around him, unpredictable, untamed. It coursed through his limbs, tingling with potential and risk. He teetered on the edge of wild magic, seeking all of its power, but with it came risks and rewards. The air around him hummed with arcane tension. Zenith, the sheep-related chaos unknown to him, raised his axe. He was growing efficient with the weapon now, each swing more confident, more precise. With a grunt, he brought the blade down on the second skeleton. Bone cracked. The skull shattered against the stone floor. Silence. Then the blue sheep bleated again, loudly. Pimim ran west, his breath quickening. He knew the layout now. If he doubled back through the first chamber and circled around to the eastern passage, he could flank the skeletons from behind. His legs were short, and his armor clanked with each step, but he pressed on, determination outweighing exhaustion. Meanwhile, Tarak strode confidently into the chamber, quarterstaff in hand. He swung at the nearest skeleton, but the blow passed harmlessly through a gap where flesh should have been. The staff hit nothing but stale air. The skeleton hissed silently, raising its rusted scimitar. It struck Zenith, slicing across his arm. Blood welled, but so did his fury. The warlock's eyes flared with fire. He raised a hand and, with a guttural incantation, unleashed a hellish rebuke. Flames erupted from beneath the creature, consuming it in an inferno from the lower planes. The skeleton collapsed, its charred bones clattering to the ground. Zenith turned to the last one, his axe already in motion. With a grim grunt, he cleaved downward, splitting the creature in two. It collapsed in a heap of ancient bone and rusted armor. At that moment, the door on the west wall burst open. Pimim stood in the doorway, breathing hard, sword raised, eyes wide. He blinked at the smoking remains of the skeletons. "I had a whole flanking plan," he muttered. Levo returned to his natural form, the last flickers of wild magic dissipating from his fur. The chamber, now silent after the clash, felt heavy with the residue of necrotic energy. The party spread out, searching for any lingering clues. Levo, eyes narrowing, recognized the faint arcane marks etched along the base of the eastern wall. "Here," he murmured, brushing dust aside to reveal a concealed seam. With practiced care, he traced the edge of a secret door. It slid open with a sigh, revealing a disused room beyond. The air inside was stale, damp with the scent of moss and ancient stone. Dust hung thick, undisturbed for decades. A dead end, at least for now. They turned back, deciding to explore the archways branching from the White's chamber. First, they went east. What greeted them was something else entirely. First, they had to deal with another of the undead that plagued this place. They did so with increasing efficiency. The room stretched out long and rectangular, disappearing into shadows beyond the reach of their torchlight. A weight hung in the air, not just silence, but the kind of oppressive stillness that smothered thought, breath, even sound. Below, where a floor might be expected, there was only water, black, cold, and perfectly still. It reflected the ceiling above with unsettling clarity, a mirror of stone and shadow waiting to be disturbed. 4 narrow wooden bridges crossed the chamber from left to right, each suspended by rusted iron chains anchored to the ceiling and side walls. But they were not connected. Each was isolated, leaving wide, dangerous gaps between them. The wood looked old, slick with damp, and groaned with age at the slightest touch. Some chains were taut and rigid, others sagged alarmingly. One bridge hung askew, tilted at an angle that suggested its time was nearly up. Beneath it, the water stirred ever so slightly, though no breeze moved the air. Tarak studied the suspended bridges in silence, arms folded, brow furrowed. "I could use my amulet to float across," he said at last, his voice low and thoughtful. "Levo could easily jump, but Pimim and Zenith..." He trailed off, glancing at the heavily armored halfling and the broad-shouldered warlock. "That's a different story." Zenith raised an eyebrow, clearly unamused. "I don't fall gracefully, if that's what you're implying." Levo shrugged. "You don't have to. Not if we find another way." Pimim tapped his fingers against his breastplate. "I'm not keen on dangling over water that looks like it might eat my soul." Tarak nodded slowly. "Then let's backtrack. That secret door Levo mentioned. Let's try that first. If there's another path, better we find it now than swim later." They turned from the eerie chamber and retraced their steps, boots echoing softly on cold stone. The oppressive stillness of the bridge room seemed to cling to them as they passed beneath the archway and re-entered the White's lair. Levo led them to the southwestern wall, where he'd earlier uncovered the seam. With a flick of his paw, the hidden door clicked and creaked open, revealing a narrow passage cloaked in dust and silence. Pimim peered into the gloom. "Smells less like doom. I'll take that as progress." They stepped cautiously into the corridor, weapons ready, shadows pressing in from either side. They traversed the narrow secret passage in silence, its damp stone walls pressing in tightly. The corridor branched first north, then east, each turn revealing only more gloom, until it finally bent westward, ending at a dark oak door bound in rusted iron hinges. Zenith approached first, pressing a hand to the aged wood. "Old but not broken," he murmured, pushing it open with a low groan. Beyond, a long, narrow chamber stretched before them, cloaked in shadows. 2 massive columns, broken and cracked, rose from the floor like the bones of some long-dead beast. Shards of shattered urns and splintered wooden boxes lay scattered across the stone, the remnants of offerings or the looted treasures of another age. At the far end of the room, beneath a crumbling fresco of a red-robed figure holding a lantern in one hand and a compass in the other, sat a light oak chest. It gleamed strangely, untouched by time, unspoiled by rot. A faint metallic scent, sharp and unsettling, clung to the air like old blood. Then came the scrape of bone against stone. Undead guardians lurking near the fresco stepped forward with a hollow hiss. Their eyes burned faintly, and their rusted swords trembled with restless violence. The party moved swiftly. Zenith, voice resonating with infernal fury, unleashed an eldritch blast, a beam of force that struck true, cracking through the skeleton's ribs. Tarak followed with a ghostly chill touch, the necrotic energy draining what little essence still animated the creature. Levo, eyes gleaming with chaos, flung a trio of magic missiles. They spiraled through the air and exploded against bone with unerring precision. The skeleton's form shattered, but not before it landed a vicious blow on Zenith, its blade carving a shallow gash across the warlock's ribs. Tarak approached the chest with caution. Its surface gleamed oddly, unmarked by dust or decay, as if time itself had refused to touch it. "It's pristine," he muttered, kneeling beside it. That's never a good sign. His fingers brushed his pouch. The iron key, he thought. Maybe this was what it was meant for. He rummaged through his pouch and retrieved the heavy iron key, its surface crusted with age and rust. With a sharp breath, he blew across it. Some of the corrosion flaked off, revealing glimmers of polished metal underneath. He slid it into the lock with slow precision. It fit perfectly. As the key clicked into place, it began to shed its rust, as though waking from a long slumber. Tiny lines of light traced along its shaft, and for a moment, Tarak hesitated. On the key's base, barely visible beneath a layer of old grime, a tiny arrow pointed counterclockwise. But he didn't see it. With practiced ease, he turned the key clockwise. A soft click echoed, followed immediately by a snap. From hidden compartments along the chest's edges, a volley of bone-tipped darts shot out with a hiss. They struck Tarak across the chest, 3 embedding themselves in his stomach, 1 finding flesh. The venom was thick, paralytic, brewed to drop a living man in seconds. Tarak did not flinch. The darts fell from his skin. His breath remained even. Poison means nothing to the dead. Unaware that he had already triggered the trap, he shifted to the side and carefully lifted the lid. Inside lay a delicate red bag. Though it appeared empty, its texture was smooth, the stitching gleaming with thread of silver craftsmanship. Embroidered on the front was a small, intricate compass, its needle eternally still, its direction southeast. Levo leaned in, his eyes widening. It looks like the same compass from the fresco. Zenith crossed his arms, his gaze narrowing. Nothing that survives this long does so by accident. It had been a long, unrelenting day. From the trek through the shadowed forest with Nemin, to the snarling wolves and skittering spiders that barred their path, and now this crypt, choked with the stench of decay and patrolled by an army of the dead. Muscles ached, spirits frayed, and the weight of each breath grew heavier. Whatever secrets lay buried here could wait. For now it was time to rest, a deep, dreamless rest, earned through blood, grit, and sheer will. As the group settled into their hard-earned rest, the dim glow of their campfire flickered against the damp stone walls, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts across the crypt. Zenith, silent for a time, finally spoke. He reached behind him and produced the staff, the one he had pried from the Wight's cold, lifeless grasp. Its shaft pulsed faintly with a violet glow, eldritch runes simmering just beneath the surface like embers in ash. "I'm not one for staves," he said, holding it out. "Feels wrong in my hands. I think it's time one of you took it." Levo leaned forward, eyes catching the purple glint. "It's beautiful," he admitted, "but not really my style. I like to keep my distance, hide in the dark, strike from the corners, blast and vanish. If things get close enough for a staff, I've already done something wrong." He glanced at Tarak, a sly grigging at one side of his muzzle. "Might be more your speed." Tarak's eyes lit with curiosity. He took the staff with reverence, fingers tracing the unfamiliar symbols along its length. "I won't waste it," he murmured. "This deserves to be used, not hoarded." He sat cross-legged on the cold stone floor, the staff resting across his knees. As the others drifted towards sleep or quiet reflection, Tarak closed his eyes and began the slow process of attunement. The glow of the staff brightened slightly in response, as if recognizing its new bearer, but only barely. Around them, silence settled, deep and heavy, but for the first time in hours, free of dread. Not yet. It would take more wisdom, more growth, perhaps even a test. Around them, the crypt lay silent. The undead were vanquished for now, and in the stillness, Tarak meditated beneath the staff's watchful glow, feeling its power like a storm on the horizon. A few waves reached the shore, but the squall of its power was just out of reach. The scent of sizzling meat and herbs drifted through the chamber, cutting through the lingering staleness of the crypt like a welcome breeze. Pimim crouched beside a small pan perched above the fire, carefully turning cuts of meat that hissed in their own juices. Around them, the party stirred slowly from their rest. Potatoes, softened just enough to hold their shape, simmered in a liquor rich with rosemary, garlic, and cracked black pepper. The aroma alone seemed to lift their spirits. Breakfast, perhaps, though in a place with no sun or moon, time was a relative thing. Pimim ladled out generous portions into their bowls with quiet pride. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" Zenith asked, eyeing his meal with genuine surprise. Pimim just smirked, biting into a slice of meat. "You pick things up when you travel light and eat on the run. Sometimes good food's the only thing between you and despair." They ate gratefully, the the warmth of the meal easing the stiffness from their limbs. The meat was tender, almost melting on the tongue, and the potatoes soaked up the fragrant broth, each bite a savory reward. It was more than just food. It was comfort, and perhaps a hint that this halfling carried deeper skill and history than he let on. When the last drops were scraped clean, they doused the fire, scattering the coals and smothering the embers beneath stone and ash. Armor was tightened, blades checked, spells whispered in readiness. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it fed, rested, and just a little bit stronger. With torches in hand and purpose in their stride, they turned once more to the depths of the crypt, the shadows parting before them. The passage sloped gently downward, the air growing colder with each step. Their boots echoed softly on the worn stone, the silence around them pressing close. At the end of the corridor, they came upon a small chamber, 10 feet square, the walls bare save for the faint traces of mold and age. At its center lay a single coffin. It was unadorned, but finely crafted. Polished wood bound in iron, built with care but no ostentation. Its presence was quiet and deliberate, as though it had been placed not to impress, but to preserve. Tarak stepped forward, fingers brushing the edge of his amulet. A familiar shimmer overtook him, and with a silent breath, he relinquished his corporeal form. The ghostly essence of him returned with more ease than before, less jarring, more natural. He was starting to feel in control of it now, like a second skin. He floated forward, spectral and silent, and leaned his face through the wood of the coffin. The world beyond the veil of the lid swam into hazy view. Inside lay a body long dead, no flesh clung to its bones, no scent of rot remained. Just a stillness that spoke of centuries past, yet something remained. Draped across the shoulders of the skeleton was a velvet cloak, red and slightly dusty and decayed. Tarak squinted. His ghostly sight couldn't see clearly, obscured by the body itself. While he could make out the cloak and the bones, finer details remained hidden. The coffin was otherwise still, no pressure plates, no runes, no glint of hidden mechanisms that he could discern. He withdrew slowly, the wood passing through his face like mist, and turned to the others. "There's something in there," he murmured. "A red cloak. No traps that I can see, but I can't see everything." Zenith stepped forward, eyes narrowing slightly. "I don't think we need to disturb the body. There may be more to it." Levo stepped closer to the coffin, squinting at the old wood with a frown. His tail flicked once, a nervous habit. "We don't want to wake up the dead," he muttered, glancing at the others. "We've seen enough animated corpses for one crypt." They decided to continue and let the dead rest. There was a door leading elsewhere. Maybe that would reveal a purpose. It didn't, only a cave-in. They went back to the coffin. Pimim gave a quiet snort. "Fair point, but if it's not trapped and it's not cursed..." He trailed off, eyeing the coffin with reluctant curiosity. Zenith folded his arms, gaze fixed on the lid. "Then we take the risk. Whatever lies ahead, we'll need every advantage." Levo, still unsure, nodded. "I'll open it." With a careful paw, he reached down. The coffin creaked as it opened, the sound unnaturally loud in the tight, silent room. Inside, the skeleton lay undisturbed, its bones curled as if still at rest. The velvet cloak shimmered softly in the light, deep red with silver embroidery at its edges. Ancient sigils, none of them recognized. As Levo lifted the coffin lid, something shifted beneath the bones, a glint of metal catching the torchlight. Nestled against the ribcage, partially hidden by the folds of velvet, was a trinket the size of a clenched fist. It was a miniature boat, crafted from silver so finely wrought it seemed to shimmer with its own light. Despite the chill of the crypt, the object was warm to the touch, almost pulsing faintly like a living thing. Tarak held it up, eyes narrowing. This was hidden beneath the cloak. "Look at the craftsmanship." Pimim leaned in, lips pursed. "A silver boat? In a coffin? That's not exactly standard fare for grave goods." Zenith tilted his head, curiosity piqued. "It's not just silver. That's mithril, or something like it. And it's enchanted. I can feel the hum of magic from here." Tarak took a step closer, his expression unreadable. Boats are symbols of passage, transition, death sometimes, or escape. The party stood in silence for a moment, the boat gleaming softly between them. Pimim broke the tension with a half grin. "Well, maybe it's our ticket out of here. If it grows big enough, I'm calling first seat." Levo nodded slowly, still studying the warm metal. "We'll hold on to it. but we treat it with care. Whatever it is, it was buried for a reason. Levo nodded slowly, still studying the warm metal. We'll hold on to it, but we treat it with care. Whatever it is, it was buried for a reason. Levo turned the silver boat over in his hand once more, then slipped it carefully into a pouch. I think we've seen all this room has to offer, he said, his voice low but steady. Yes, agreed Tarak, but there's something that's been tugging at me. He looked to Zenith. That basin, the one that gave you those visions, if it showed you something once, maybe it will again. Especially now that we've found this. He nodded toward Levo's pouch. Magic has a way of revealing more when it's nudged. Zenith nodded, his gaze distant and thoughtful. That dream, it wasn't just memory, it was layered with something else, like a voice trying to guide me. He paused, then shook his head. But I'm not doing it again. I'll do it, said Levo without hesitation. Levo folded his arms. Then maybe we follow that whisper. Worst case, we just stare into water and look mysterious. Best case, clues. Pimim tightened the straps of his pack and grinned. Well, I'm always up for a stroll to a magical bowl of potential doom. Let's go before I get too comfortable. The party retraced their steps through the narrow passageways, shadows dancing along the stone as their torchlight flickered. The air seemed to thicken as they neared the basin chamber once more. Heavier now, charged, as though the crypt itself anticipated their return. The basin sat in its usual place, still and unassuming. Yet this time, with the trinket in their possession and the memory of visions still fresh, it seemed to hum softly with possibility. Zenith stepped forward, then stopped, turning slightly. Let's see what it wants to show us this time. Levo moved past him. He knelt beside the basin, took a breath, and reached out toward the water.